Welcome. Welcome to another Rich's Reframes and the playlist called Dialogue with the Devil. As I mentioned in the first chapter, I was visited by this demon. He called himself Wormwood, and he just appeared in my study. And it turned out he wanted me to write about all his accomplishments, creating huge amounts of suffering in the world. I go into chapter 1, why, and I think how I can manipulate him and appeal to his ego to really get the inside story. And you guys get it first before it goes into the book. So anyway, he appeared again, and it still scared the you-know-what out of me. I'm not just used to that kind of grayish skin-colored guy with these goggles and eyeglasses just showing up. So he wanted to brag about the amount of suffering he creates for inner city, and specifically minority groups, and even more so Black people, how he manages to increase the suffering. So I was fascinated by this because I know that systemic racism causes a lot of suffering. So I was not clear about how he could possibly make things even worse. He laughed. Worse? I can make things so bad you wouldn't believe it. So how do you do that? And he said, well, first of all, let's look at the future. It's going to be more technological. There's going to be artificial intelligence, computer programs, apps. Our phones are going to get smarter. We're going to have robotics in the factory. So in other words, it's going to be a world where those who succeed have a lot of knowledge and education and a lot of skills. And there's still going to be, waiters and gardeners and construction workers. But he said, even that is going to get automated in a way that you really need. If you're not put out of a job, you really need to upgrade in skills. I'm going, hey, wait a minute. Why are you talking about the future and the plight of inner city kids? And you're saying you're increasing the suffering. Well, he said, what if you were an inner city kid and the world of the future required a great education? Are you going to suffer because you are going to have no hope and no choice? Well, I know that inner city schools are bad, but no, he said, I do that. This is what I want you to write about, my accomplishments. You mean you are so evil that you deprive inner city kids of an education just to spread suffering? He looks surprised. I mean, he says, I am the head demon on earth. That's my job. And boy, am I good at it. And so of course I was interested and curious. How do you do that? First of all, he says, you don't give kids a choice. And then you destroy the public school system. He said, so easy. All we have to do is take over just a few people in the teachers' unions, and then a few people in the government who say this wonderful stuff like, oh, public schools is for everybody. We can't have special schools for special people. That'll leave people behind and all that. But then we got almost everybody locked into a lousy education. He said, teachers unions, oh my God, they're so easy. And the liberal governments who are supporting the teachers unions give the Democrats money, and then the Democrats prohibit on a local and every level they can, kids from having choice at school. And he says, given the future that is technologically oriented, he got really happy. That gray almost turned to a reddish glow on his face. And he said about the amount of suffering in the Black community that was going to happen in the future. And he wanted to take credit for it. Wow, I said, is that all you do? I mean, that's terrible enough. He says, no, we've got other things too. He says way back in the 40s when the Black communities were thriving, they were poor but thriving. He says, They were using marijuana. So we outlawed marijuana so we could really clamp down on them whenever we wanted and arrest them. And he says, now that's expanded to lots of drugs. So what happens? We take away their education by locking them into lousy public schools. We support the teachers' unions that give money to the government on all levels that then prohibit or make it really hard for charter schools or choose choice. Then we provide an income with drug sales and being a drug dealer. He says, and then they promote drugs to the inner city kids who have no hope, and drugs are a way to self-medicate and just give themselves a temporary feeling from the hopelessness and just to give them a sense of just a relief from the pain and the suffering they feel. But of course, he said, I mean, if it really solved their suffering, we wouldn't do that. But we know that drugs, of course, might give you a temporary lift, but it's all downhill from there. Wow, I said. What about systemic racism? Isn't that? He says, no. In the United States, that's almost all gone, except for the teachers and the schools. That's systemic, and that's our last stronghold. I mean, he says, you guys have gotten rid of almost all the systemic racism everywhere. I mean, they're still racist, he said, and we encourage those. I said, you encourage those? Yeah, well, we need a diversion. In other words, he says, the white nationalists, the Ku Klux Klan, and those few, I mean, they're dying out. He says, we have to work to keep them alive simply because that gives the Democrats something to focus on and get excited about and say how bad things are and how bad white people are and how bad racism is. But that's focused over here when our job is over here. I mean, they're focused on something that's like this, and we're doing something like this. We are destroying future generations of inner city Black and minority kids in a way that's going to make suffering just friggin' awesome. Wow. That really hit me and hit me hard because I'm a nice guy. I mean, I'm an author, I'm a therapist. And to think of all the suffering that's created, and it just took so little. Anyway, I told the demon, I told Wormwood, somewhere I've heard that. Anyway, I told Wormwood that I just couldn't write the book and I couldn't brag about that suffering. And he put his hand on my shoulder and I felt this coldness just creep through my body. And I felt myself just going black. And he said, yes, you will. Yes, you will. And I said, yes, master, I will write the book. Wow, then he left. So what I'm doing is I'm making recordings of our conversations. So in case something happens to me, that you guys kind of know what happened and you can kind of spread the word that I was either possessed or killed by a demon because I wouldn't write what he wanted me to. So anyway, the suffering that he creates is just terrible. So we will continue the conversations with the demon and we will go through step by step, apparently what he told me, on all the suffering he causes in the world. It's horrible. It's horrible.